scheduled class of Federation of United Doctors. That is the cardiology class today. That is the examination of heart by Dr. Sonali Sarkar. She is our esteemed teacher today, DM cardiologist, and we welcome her on behalf of Federation of United Doctors, and we welcome all the students and participants. So now I hand over the podium to Dr. Sonali Sarkar.
Thank you, Dr. Shomojyoti, for the kind introduction. Examination of heart is a very big topic, so I have divided it into 2 days. Part 1, which we will deal with today, deals with inspection and palpation, and part 2, that is auscultation, we will deal with it on Wednesday. So let's start. First, we will deal with inspection. So in inspection, what we will do, we will examine the chest. Examine the chest for its shape, cutaneous lesions, breast abnormalities, and distended vessels over the chest and back. I am just giving a brief idea of the sublines or subheadings under which the topic will be discussed. Then the examination of the precordium for precordial bulging and examination of cardiovascular pulsations. This will include the apical impulse, the pulsations in the right and left second intercostal space. All of you know that is the right second intercostal space is the aortic area and the left second intercostal space is the pulmonary area. And pulsations in the right and left sternoclavicular area, left parasternal pulsation, pulsation in the epigastrium, and pulsation in the ectopic area. First is how you will inspect the patient. The patient should lie comfortably in supine position. The thorax may be elevated to 30 degrees, not more than that. Now you have to examine the thorax tangentially from the foot end of the bed and then from the patient's right side. So this is a picture showing the position of the patient. That is a supine patient, there should be proper exposure, and you will inspect the patient from the foot end and then from the right side. So what will you see? The shape of the chest. The normal shape of the chest in an adult is bilaterally symmetrical chest. It is elliptical in shape with the transverse diameter more than the anteroposterior diameter. And the subxiphoid angle is about 90 degrees. So what happens in the barrel-shaped chest? In the barrel-shaped chest, due to hyperinflation of the lungs, the anteroposterior diameter will be more than the transverse diameter. So it occurs in chronic obstructive pulmonary disorders. Why? Because there is hyperinflation and air trapping in the lungs, so the lungs gets hyperinflated. Now if you see a muscular thorax with well-developed upper limbs but with thin lower limbs, the cause is coarctation of aorta. Why does it occur? Because in coarctation of aorta, there is forced subclavian coarctation, most common. So that means subclavian artery is supplying the upper limbs, and after that, after the subclavian artery, then there is the descending thoracic aorta, the abdominal aorta, and then there is the divides into the femoral arteries. So blood supply up to the subclavian arteries is normal. Since the subclavian artery supplies the upper limbs are well developed. But blood supply or blood flow in the descending abdominal aorta and the femoral arteries are less. Therefore, the lower limbs are thin. So if you find a patient with muscular thorax with well-developed upper limbs, but the lower limbs are thin, so you get the hint by inspection of the patient itself that the patient may have coarctation of aorta. Shield chest, what is the meaning of this? Broad chest with widely spaced nipples, and there will be a prominent angle between the manubrium sterni and the body of the sternum. If you find this, then the patient may have Turner syndrome and Noonan syndromes. So at your level, you may not know about all this thing. Associations of, there are various diseases associated with Turner and Noonan syndrome, which will be a very long chapter. But this is a brief hint. Pigeon chest or pectus carinatum. This is pigeon chest. What happens in pigeon chest? There is forward bulging of the sternum and the adjacent costal cartilages. This is found in Marfan syndrome and Noonan syndrome. Next is funnel chest or pectus excavatum. What do you see here? Normally the lower end of the sternum is hollow, but here this hollowness is increased. That is, there is posterior displacement of the sternum. So what happens in pectus excavatum? If you find this, that means the patient may have Marfan syndrome, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, Hunter-Hurler syndrome, or homocystinuria. Now about Significance of breast abnormalities. There may be male gynecomastia. So this causes, commonest cause clinically is adverse effect of digitalis therapy. Digitalis is very commonly used drug in heart failure, and patients who are on long-term digitalis commonly complain of gynecomastia. Also, another drug which causes gynecomastia or mastitis in males is aldactone or spironolactone. Second cause of male gynecomastia is Klinefelter syndrome. Klinefelter syndrome is again associated with numerous cardiovascular disorders. Female hypomastia. This occurs in mitral valve prolapse syndrome. And again, the shield chest with widely spaced nipples occurs in Turner's and Noonan syndromes. I've already gone through this slide. So what is the significance of an abnormal shape of the chest? What are the abnormal shape of the chest? Like a barrel-shaped chest, patient may have kyphoscoliosis, patient may have straight back syndrome, or patient may have funnel chest. All these abnormal shapes will lead to displacement of the apex from its normal position. It will give rise to precordial bulging, and it will give rise to murmurs and abnormal splitting of the second heart sound. And all these findings will mimic a cardiac lesion, although the patient may not have any cardiac disease. So that is the importance of abnormal shape of the chest. The patient may not have any cardiac disease, but since the abnormal shape of the chest will produce these findings, it can produce apical displacement, bulging, it can produce murmurs, it can produce abnormal second heart sound. Hence, you may think that the patient has a heart disease. Straight back syndrome is loss of normal thoracic kyphosis. It is associated with splitting of the second heart sound, this parasternal impulse, and there is a mid-systolic murmur at the pulmonary area along with prominence of pulmonary artery. So all these findings are also found in ASD, atrial septal defect. So this patient may not have ASD, but on inspection or examination of the patient, you may get findings of ASD. What are these? Parasternal impulse, abnormal splitting of the second heart sound, and a mid-systolic murmur. Aortic aneurysm may present as a bulge to the right part of the upper sternum. What are Harrison-Sulci? Supposing you find a person with Harrison-Sulci. Harrison-Sulci are what? These are transverse grooves extending from the sternum to the both sides of the thorax, giving the appearance of a transverse constriction of the thorax. So what do these grooves correspond to? These correspond to the costal attachments of the diaphragm. That means this person is heavily using his diaphragmatic muscles for respiration from a very early age, which has led to a deformity of his ribs. So this occurs in children with rickets, or chronic nasal or nasopharyngeal obstruction. Second is, now we come to cutaneous lesions on the chest. We all know about spider nevi. We have commonly seen it in patients with hepatic cirrhosis and also occurs in patients with Osler-Weber-Rendu syndrome. Now what? If you find distended vessels over the chest and the back, these can be distended veins or these can be distended arteries. So distended veins on the anterior chest wall with caudal flow suggest obstruction of the superior vena cava. But distended veins with cranial flow indicate inferior vena cava obstruction. How do you determine whether the veins have caudal flow or cranial flow? That is, you will first use 2 fingers to empty or milk the vein. When you release the upper finger, you see how rapidly the vein is getting filled up. Then again, and then you remove the lower finger, and you then see how rapidly the vein is filling up. The direction of filling up of which fills up more rapidly, that direction indicates the direction of flow. Supposing it fills rapidly downwards, that means the flow is caudal. That means your flow is obstruction of the superior vena cava. That is why the blood is going towards inferior vena cava. But if the distended veins have cranial flow, that is, there is rapid flow towards the cranium, that means this obstruction is down. That means the inferior vena cava is obstructed. Now you see arteries. Arteries or collateral arteries, where are these significant? If these are found on the back, that is back in the interscapular region or the infrascapular region or in the posterior intercostal spaces. These are again significant in case of coarctation of aorta, because of the obstruction of the aorta after the subclavian artery, the aorta builds up abnormal collaterals. These are seen here. So how do you inspect for abnormal collaterals? You ask the patient to bend down. Then you will see the collateral vessels here in the interscapular and the infrascapular regions. This sign is known as Sussman's sign in coarctation of aorta. Now you examine the precordium for any bulging. Bulging can be of these types. That is, there may be bulging of only the intercostal spaces without the involvement of the ribs. This is suggestive of pericardial effusion. When the bulging involves both the intercostal spaces and the ribs, it suggests cardiac enlargement, usually of long-standing duration, and that is onset is before puberty. That is, it will indicate a congenital heart disease, usually due to right ventricular dilatation. Because both intercostal spaces and ribs are bulged, usually denotes the presence of heart disease with onset before puberty, denotes the dilatation of the right ventricle. Precordial bulging of non-cardiovascular origin can also occur. So it means involvement of only the bones. So it can occur in scoliosis, kyphoscoliosis, or rickety deformity of the chest. So this is precordial bulging due to severe kyphoscoliosis. This patient does not have any heart disease, but his findings will mislead you to think that this patient may have heart disease. So cardiac causes of precordial bulging are pericardial effusion and cardiomegaly, and non-cardiac causes of precordial bulging will be scoliosis, kyphoscoliosis, rickets, bronchogenic carcinoma, and new growth of the mediastinum, which is eroding the ribs. Now is cardiovascular pulsations. So what are the areas that you will examine? This is the sternoclavicular area. This is a junction between the sternum and the clavicles, the right and the left sternoclavicular area. Then this is the right parasternal area. This is the pulmonary area, the left parasternal area, the apical area, epigastric area, and this is for ectopic areas. Now we will come to how to look for the pulsations in these areas and what does it denote. First is apical impulse. So how do you define a normal apical impulse? This is the lowermost and outermost point of maximal impulse in early systole, which will impart a perpendicular gentle thrust to the palpating finger. This is followed by a retraction, that is the apex will move away from your fingers, but this retraction is better seen than felt. So there are 2 points. It will be the lowermost and outermost point on the precordium, and also it will be the point of maximal impulse. It will be felt in early systole as a gentle thrust to the palpating finger. Now, whether this thrust is gentle or it is not gentle can only be experienced by repeated practice, so repeatedly seeing the patients. So what are the characteristics of a normal apical impulse? It will occur in early systole. It will be the outermost and lowermost point. Location will be 5th left intercostal space at or medial to the midclavicular line, and it should be within 10 centimeters from the mid-sternal line. So what is the extent? Less than 3 centimeters in diameter and located to only 1 intercostal space, and duration will be less than 50% of systole. So these are the points of a normal apical impulse. We should remember this, because then if we know the normal, then only we can go to find what is the abnormal thing. So the normal is the outermost and lowermost point of maximal impulse, 5th left intercostal space, at or just medial to the midclavicular line, within 10 centimeter from the mid-sternal line, less than 3 centimeter in diameter, will be found in only 1 intercostal space, and duration will be less than 50% of systole. So if you are examining the patient, if you do not get an apical impulse, what are the causes of absent apical impulse? The causes will be, again, we will divide it into cardiac causes and non-cardiac causes. Cardiac causes is dilated cardiomyopathy. The pumping of the heart is so weak that it does not lead to a forceful filling of the ventricle. Hence, the left ventricle does not come out, does not produce a maximal impulse. Pericardial effusion or coronary artery disease and heart failure. Non-cardiac causes will be the apex lies behind the rib, muscular chest wall, obesity, COPD, that is the hyperinflated lung is covering the heart, or left-sided pleural effusion. Double apical impulse, that is within systole, the heart, you can feel the apex to touch your fingers twice. It occurs in hypertrophic obstructive cardiomyopathy or LV aneurysm. Then there is lateral retraction of the apical impulse or Skoda's sign. Skoda's sign occurs in adhesive pericarditis. What happens here? The apex retraction, that is, or it occurs in right ventricular hypertrophy. That is, when a right ventricle occupies the apex, it extends from the left sternal edge to the cardiac apex with exaggerated lateral apical retraction. That is, the apex will retract from your hands. We will come to this again in detail. Broadband sign is systolic indrawing or retraction of the 10th and 11th left intercostal spaces, typically seen in constrictive pericarditis. If you see a right-sided apical impulse, obviously it is dextrocardia or congenital heart disease, but it can be due to left-sided massive pleural effusion or pneumothorax, which will push the heart to the right, or it can be due to right lung collapse, which will pull the heart to the right, or it can be due to skeletal abnormalities like scoliosis. Extent of apical impulse, diffuse apical impulse, what is the meaning of that? If the diameter of the impulse is more than 3 cm or the apical impulse is present in more than 1 intercostal space. So cardiac causes are eccentric LVH, as in aortic regurgitation. What is the meaning of eccentric? It is dilated heart, hypertrophy with dilatation, or LV aneurysm. And non-cardiac causes are subjects with thin chest wall, fever, thyrotoxicosis, or retraction of the lung due to fibrosis or collapse. Now we will come to causes of displacement of apical impulse. Lateral displacement, that is, the apical impulse is displaced outside. Normally, you will get it in the 5th intercostal space at or just medial to the midclavicular line. But in case of lateral displacement, you will get it outside the midclavicular line. So when does it occur? It occurs in skeletal abnormalities like scoliosis, straight back syndrome, or pectus excavatum. Again, we have already talked about this intrathoracic abnormality like right-sided pleural effusion and right-sided pneumothorax will push the heart to the left. So the apex beat will go outside the midclavicular line. Again, left lung collapse. Left lung collapse will pull the heart to the left. So again, the apex beat will go outside the left midclavicular line. Eccentric left ventricular hypertrophy. What is the meaning of eccentric? There is a heart is dilated as well as the wall is thickened. So this condition occurs in volume overload conditions. What are the volume overload conditions? Mitral regurgitation and aortic regurgitation. In these cases also, the apex will go downwards. So the apex will be found outside the midclavicular line on the left side and also downwards, that is below the left 5th intercostal space. It may be found in 6th or 7th intercostal space or even 8th intercostal space and outside the left midclavicular line. But what happens in right ventricular hypertrophy in a patient of mitral stenosis? Here the apex will be formed by right ventricle. But the difference is that the apex will be outside the left midclavicular line, but the apex will not go down. That is, it will remain only in the 5th intercostal space. Upward displacement occurs in normal children, pregnancy, ascites, abdominal tumor, and pericardial effusion. Why in pericardial effusion? Because the fluid has a tendency to gravitate downwards. So when the patient with pericardial effusion, the pericardial fluid will come downwards in the posterior and lowermost part of the pericardium. So this will push the apex upwards and to the left. Now downward displacement of cardiac apex can occur in aortic and pulsations in the sternoclavicular area can occur due to aortic dissection, aneurysm of the aorta, or aortic regurgitation, or right-sided aortic arch. Causes of suprasternal pulsations are aneurysm of the arch of the aorta, unfolding of the aorta, aortic regurgitation, or arteriothyroidea. Now coming to left parasternal pulsation. This is a very important topic. Left parasternal pulsation can be seen normally in children and thin adults who have a small anteroposterior diameter or in patients with pectus excavatum. Now, what are the pathological conditions where we can see left parasternal pulsation? Normally, the area of the heart which is in the left parasternal region is the right ventricle. So right ventricular hypertrophy will lead to a left parasternal pulsation. This right ventricular hypertrophy can occur with pressure overload conditions, pulmonary stenosis, pulmonary hypertension due to mitral valve disease, commonly mitral stenosis, or left ventricular failure, or left to right shunt like DSD and ASD. Or it can occur in pulmonary embolism, primary pulmonary hypertension, or core pulmonary. It can occur in right ventricular hypertrophy due to volume overload conditions, that is mild to moderate tricuspid regurgitation, ASD and DSD. But left parasternal pulsation can also occur due to anterior systolic movement of normal RV. What is the meaning of this? It is when the heart contracts, LV contracts, the LV due to the regurgitation, a huge amount of blood regurgitates from the left ventricle into the dilated left atria. So the left atria, when it expands, it causes anterior displacement of the right ventricle. This anterior displacement of the normal right ventricle produces a left parasternal impulse. What other cases can cause? This is uncommon. This is regional wall motion abnormalities of the left ventricle, resulting in dyskinetic motion of the ventricular septum. This is not very clinically important. Clinically important for exam purposes, moderate to severe mitral regurgitation, where even a normal right ventricle can produce a left parasternal impulse. Why? Because the dilated left atria, which lies behind the right ventricle, expands due to regurgitation of blood from the left ventricle into the left atria in late systole. So left parasternal pulsation may be due to right ventricular hypertrophy. It can be due to pressure overload or volume overload, or may be due to normal right ventricle. Commonest causes moderate to severe mitral regurgitation. This is known as squid effect. Now, epigastric pulsations. Epigastric pulsations can be due to origin is 3, cardiac due to right ventricular hypertrophy, aortic in thin-built or hyperkinetic individuals, aneurysm of descending aorta and aortic regurgitation. In the palpation part, we will teach you how to differentiate between these three. And hepatic, tricuspid regurgitation and tricuspid stenosis. These are the cause of epigastric pulsations. Pulsations in ectopic areas, that is other areas over the heart which are other than these, that is the apical, the parasternal, the sternoclavicular, the aortic, pulmonary area, leaving all these. It can be an ectopic left ventricular impulse located usually above and medial to the normal apical impulse. Ectopic left atrial impulse in a patient of severe mitral regurgitation with giant left atrium. When it's called the giant left atrium, when the volume is more than 1000 cc's. 1000 cubic millimeters. This extends to the right, and there can be an impulse in the right anterior chest or the lateral chest, or the right atrial impulse. Right atrial impulses will be seen if present abnormally in the fourth intercostal space on the right side. And this enlarged right atrium can occur in tricuspid regurgitation. Just as mitral regurgitation produces enlarged left atria, tricuspid regurgitation will produce an enlarged right atria. But this finding is usually not seen commonly. Ectopic impulse beneath the left clavicle is seen in patients with PDS, patent ductus arteriosus. Now coming to palpation. So what is the optimal position of palpation? The apex should be first palpated in the supine position. Ideally, the trunk should be elevated to 30 degrees, but for exam purpose, you need not do it. And need not mention is also. And the character of the cardiac apex is determined in the left lateral position. That is, it is rotated to 45 to 90 degrees. And the outward movement of the apical impulse is normally felt during the first third of systole. That is what you will do. First, the patient will be supine with your fingers. You try to locate the apex beat. Now, if you have well localized the apex beat, next you rotate the patient to 45 to 90 degrees to the left to find out the character of the apex beat. Also, when you will rotate the patient to left, supposing you do not get any apex beat in the supine position, then you will look for the apex beat after the patient is rotated to 45 to 90 degrees. And even then, if you do not find and you do not have any apex beat on the right side also, then you say that the patient has absent apical impulse. Now, what are the areas of your hand which you will use to localize the pulsations? So, heaves or lifts will be localized by this portion of the wrist joint. Thrills will be localized by this portion, and localized pulsations with the tips of the fingers. So, these are the optimal areas on the examiner's hand for precordial palpation. So, if you cannot find a thrill, try to feel the thrill with this area, you will find it. And heaves or lifts are ideally to the base of the wrist. And localized pulsations like the apex beat and all, you will find it with the tip of the finger, or the epigastric pulsation you will find with the tip of the finger. So causes of precordial tenderness are acute pericarditis, acute myocarditis, or teeth syndrome. This is this thing, costochondritis of the painful inflammation of the joints of the ribs. Now, what do you mean by the character of the apex beat? First, learn these three terms, then we will go to the causes. First is capping apex beat. Capping apex beat is found in mitral stenosis. The apex beat is said to be impalpable and it is replaced by a short. Explain at this moment. Now, what are the causes of palpable S3 and S4? Palpable S3 occurs in children, pregnancy, left ventricular failure, and chronic mitral regurgitation. While palpable S4 occurs in aortic stenosis, hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, acute mitral and acute aortic regurgitation, normal women of less than 40 years of age. Now, there is another finding called palpable pericardial knock. It occurs in constrictive pericarditis, where there is systolic retraction of the whole of the pericardium, but especially seen in the left 10th and 11th spaces in the posterior axillary or scapular line, also known as Broadbent sign, and is found in constrictive pericarditis. So, how do you know whether this is S3 or S4? By the company it keeps. S3 will occur earlier in diastole, S4 occurs later in diastole. That is, the gap between A2 and S3 is smaller compared to the gap between A2 and S4. And also by the company it keeps. That is, if this patient has a long hollow systolic murmur at the apex of mitral regurgitation, and if you can feel a third heart sound at the apex, that means it is a palpable S3. But if this patient has a long systolic murmur at the sash area or the right second intercostal space, that is, it is a murmur of aortic stenosis. So if you palpate a third heart sound at the apex, it is S4 and not S3. So what are the palpable high frequency sounds at the apex? Loud S1 in mitral stenosis, opening snap of mitral stenosis. Okay, opening snap indicates that the mitral stenosis, the valves are pliable and non-calcified. Tumor plop occurs in left atrial myxoma or ejection plate which occurs in bicuspid aortic valve. Now coming to parasternal lift. This is the picture showing how you will examine the patient for a parasternal lift. That is, you will have to place the ulnar border of your hand in the parasternal area and look for the up and down movement of this border, up and down movement of your hand. So how do you grade the parasternal lift? You grade by the amplitude of excursion, that is how much your hand is moving. And second is the duration of the lift. This is noted by simultaneous auscultation. As I told you, that if it is less than 50% of systole or more than 50% of systole. Am I clear? First is you will place your ulnar border of the hand in the left parasternal area. If there is a parasternal lift, your hand will move like this. It will move up and it will move down. Now you try to feel what is the force with which your hand is moving up and down. Whether it is a very mild force or it is a very strong force producing a lot of movement. Second is what is the duration of this movement. Whether it is ill-sustained, that is for a very short duration of time, less than 50%, or it is very forceful and well-sustained. It is for a long duration of time occurring for more than 50%. That is how you will grade the parasternal lift. So what is mild parasternal lift? Mild lift can be made out after careful inspection, or your hand may easily obliterate it. But if you place a light objects like a pencil or a scale around the parasternal border, it will make it more obvious. It is so mild that if you put your ulnar border of the hand on the parasternal area, even for a normal person or people with very big hands, it will obliterate the parasternal lift. So it can be better seen by placing light objects like a pencil or a scale. It disappears with the application of mild counter pressure, and the duration is less than 1/3 of systole. That is, if you press your ulnar border of the hand in order to stop the obliterate the parasternal lift, only mild pressure will result in AS3 will also indicates volume overload of RV due to TR and ASD. S4 indicates pressure overload conditions, both in LV and RV. So RV S4 associated with pulmonary stenosis or pulmonary supine position with right lateral rotation. Here again you can find RV S3 and S4. We already discussed the causes. Our opening snap of tricuspid stenosis may be found in palpation of the tricuspid area. That is the lower left sternal area in supine position with right lateral rotation. Now, how do you palpate the aortic and the pulmonary area? The aortic area is a right second intercostal space. You will have to ask the patient to sit up, mild leaning forward with the breath held in expiration. Same for the pulmonary area. The left second intercostal space with the tips of your fingers. The patient is sitting and leaning forward with the breath held in expiration. Why expiration? Although it's pulmonary area and a right-sided event, because during expiration, the apex of the lungs will be smaller. Hence, you can easily palpate the aortic and the pulmonary area. In inflation, the apex of the lungs will be filled with air, so there will be diminished. The aortic and the pulmonary area will not be easily palpated because the apex it will come till here, the apex of the lungs. So what can you palpate in the aortic area? You mention the palpable A2. That is the palpable aortic component of the second heart sound. It can occur in systemic hypertension, dilated aortic root, and in aortic stenosis. Also, it can occur in cyanotic congenital heart disease. When the pulmonary trunk is small, as in top, or when the aorta is anterior to the pulmonary trunk. Normally, the pulmonary trunk is anterior to the aorta. So if you can feel the aorta, that means either the aorta is large or the aorta is anterior. The aorta is relatively large in top and the aorta is anterior in TGA, transposition of great arteries. Now palpable ejection sound in the aortic area is an aortic ejection clip, occurs in bicuspid aortic valves. In pulmonary area, similarly you can find a palpable P2. Again, it can occur in pulmonary hypertension of any cause. Or it can be a palpable ejection clip. It can occur in pulmonary stenosis. So precordial thrills. Palpable murmur is a thrill. So what are the different locations and the different cycles of the cardiac cycle, and then we classify what are the thrills. In the apex, diastolic thrill is commonest, occurs in mitral stenosis. Systolic thrill can occur in acute severe mitral regurgitation due to caudal rupture. Systolic thrill at apex due to aortic stenosis is uncommon, so we will not mention this. Diastolic thrill at the tricuspid area is due to tricuspid stenosis, and systolic thrill is due to severe tricuspid regurgitation. Pulmonary area, systolic thrill is due to pulmonary stenosis, continuous thrill is due to PDA, and the aortic area, the systolic thrill is due to aortic stenosis. Now palpation of the epigastrium. The subxiphoid region, the palpation, epigastrial palpation helps to identify the palpation of the right ventricle. It should be examined with the tip of the index finger during held inspiration and supine position. It's particularly useful in patients with increased epidiameter, in COPD, obesity, or muscular chest. When RV palpated the patient in the supine position, the breath held in inspiration because it is a right-sided event, and we palpate it with the tip of the index finger. But pulsations in the epigastrium we have already seen can be due to aortic pulsation or hepatic pulsation. We've already seen the chart. Now, how do you differentiate as to which structure is giving rise to the palpation in the epigastrium? This is the initial palpation. You first feel with the tip of the index finger whether there is a pulse in the epigastrium. The patient is supine with the breath held in inspiration. Next is, if the pulsation is due to right ventricular hypertrophy, it will come, right ventricle is here, so it will come from above, so you will feel the pulsation at the tip. Now the aortic pulsation, you will feel the pulsation on the palmar surface. And hepatic pulsation will be here, it is coming from here, so you will feel it on the lateral surface of the index finger. So for the RV, it is coming from above, you will feel at the tip. From the aorta, which is coming from the intra-abdominal structure, so you will feel it on the palmar surface of the index finger. And for the hepatic pulsation, you will feel on the lateral surface of the index finger. So that is how you differentiate as to what is the cause of the epigastric pulsation. Now we will look at the what is the condition of the precordium in some common cardiac conditions. How to do that? Precordium in mitral stenosis. That is a summation of both inspection and palpation. So in mitral stenosis, what happens? So right ventricle is hypertrophied. So the apex is formed by the hypertrophied right ventricle. The character of the apex is tapping in character. It is a palpable equivalent of S1. If the apex is formed by the hypertrophied right ventricle, where will the apex be located? It will be located in the left fifth intercostal space outside the mid-clavicular line. But it will not go down from the fifth intercostal space. It can also be felt, the apical impulse will be more than 3 centimeter in diameter. It may be felt throughout, it may be diffuse in character. One is that a diffuse character of the apex that is more than 3 centimeter in diameter and palpable in more than 1 intercostal space is most commonly due to right ventricle. But a localized apex is most commonly due to left ventricle. So am I clear? The apex in mitral stenosis will be formed by the right ventricle. That is, it will be found outside the left fifth clavicular line, but in the fifth intercostal space only. It will be tapping in character. You may have a palpable diastolic thrill. Palpable opening snap is not common. Left parasternal lift, it will be formed by the right ventricle. That will be a sustained heave because the patient most commonly has moderate to severe pulmonary hypertension. So you'll get features of moderate to severe pulmonary hypertension in the form of a left parasternal heave. So in pulmonary hypertension, you will again have some findings in the pulmonary area. What will be? You may get a palpable P2 in pulmonary hypertension. You may get an epigastric pulsation due to right ventricular hypertrophy. In the epigastrium, you may also get a pulsatile liver due to associated tricuspid regurgitation or stenosis. Precordial percussion is not performed in cardiology. Now coming to mitral regurgitation. Here the apex will be formed by the left ventricle, although also the left ventricle is dilated. So you will find the apex beat to be displaced downwards and outwards. It is outside the left outside the midclavicular line and in the left 6th, 7th or 8th intercostal space. The character will be hyperkinetic, that is forceful in sustain. Forceful means it will lift your palpating fingers easily. Ill sustain means the duration will be less than 50% of systole. Systolic thrill in mitral regurgitation is very less common. Diastolic thrill in mitral stenosis is common. Now you will also find an LVS3. That is, in diastole you may feel that the heart is coming back and producing a pulsating sensation on your fingers. It feels like the purring of a cat. If you have touched a cat who is lying quietly but purring, those people will be able to recognize LVS3 easier. The feeling is same, purring of a cat. It occurs in chronic mitral regurgitation. Left parasternal lift is due to squid effect. That is, it will be lower and ill sustained. But if the left parasternal lift, if there is associated pulmonary hypertension, left parasternal lift will be due to right ventricle. That is, it will be well sustained. Now in aortic stenosis, what happens? In aortic stenosis, the left ventricle undergoes pressure hypertrophy. It is the wall is thickened and also, but it is not dilated. So the apex is formed by the hypertrophied left ventricle, but it is heaving in character. Heaving means forceful, well sustained. Forceful means it will easily lift your palpating fingers, and well sustained means it will be more than 50% of systole. There will be a systolic thrill in calcified aortic stenosis. S4 may be palpable. It's difficult to find S4. But if in a patient of aortic stenosis, the inference is done reciprocally. That is, if in a patient of aortic stenosis, if you find some pulsation in the apex at diastole, that means it is S4. The aortic area, you will find a systolic thrill, which will be conducted to the carotids. Now in aortic regurgitation, the apex is formed by the eccentric hypertrophy of the left ventricle. That is, the left ventricle is dilated as well as the wall is thickened. So the apex will be down and out and hyperdynamic. That is forceful but ill sustained. That is less than 50% of systole. And in the aortic area, Rarely a diastolic thrill is found. When it is found, when aortic regurgitation is due to injury to the cusps. In the carotids, there will be a functional systolic thrill, and percussion is not done. Although percussion are included in the chart, but percussion cardiology is not done. Now, in atrial septal defect, the apex is formed by the right ventricle, and there will be a systolic retraction when the left to right shunt is more than 1.5:1. That is, during systole, continues beyond the second heart sound by auscultation. If the thrill continues beyond the second heart sound, that means it is continuous. If the thrill stops at or before the second heart sound, that means it is only systolic. Now, in cyanotic congenital heart disease, that is mostly in top, the apex is formed by the hypertrophic right ventricle. There is left parasternal lift is absent. In the pulmonary area, you will not get any pulsations. Now, in cardiomyopathy. In dilated cardiomyopathy, what will be the apex? Dilated cardiomyopathy, what happens? The heart dilates, goes down and out. In hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, the heart wall is thickened, but it does not dilate. While in restrictive cardiomyopathy, the heart will not be able to expand properly. So what will happen to the apex? In dilated cardiomyopathy, volume overload of the heart, apex will be displaced down and out. But since the patient is in failure, the apex will not be forceful or well sustained. In hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, again it will be formed by left ventricle, but the apex will be forceful and well sustained because it is a pressure overload condition, and there may be double apical impulse. While in restrictive cardiomyopathy, there will be normal apical impulse, or if the patient has mitral regurgitation, then it will be hyperdynamic. Palpable S3 is commonly found in dilated cardiomyopathy. It is palpable S4 is found in hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Remember, S3 is for volume overload conditions, and S4 is for pressure overload conditions. So, volume overload condition occurs in dilated cardiomyopathy, you will find S3. Hypertrophic cardiomyopathy is a pressure overload condition, so you will find a S4. Also, restrictive cardiomyopathy, you will find a S4. Now, thrills, dilated cardiomyopathy, no thrill. Hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, you will find a systolic thrill at the left parasternal region. Restrictive cardiomyopathy, you will not find any thrill at the apex. So thank you. That's the summation of inspection and palpation of the heart. And we will deal with the auscultation in the next class. So if you have any questions, you can put up in the chat, in the chat section. Your diaphragm on your stethoscope diaphragm will also lift up if it is a very forceful, well sustained. So since you are auscultating at the same time, you will find that the lifting of the diaphragm of the stethoscope is more than 50% of the system.
Yes, actually, there is no more questions. I think we should go for ending the session. I would like to thank Dr. Sonali for such an elaborate and